At our family anniversary dinner, my dad leaned in, napkin still in his hand. "Tell me the $200,000 I gave you, what did you do with it?" The room froze. Forks hung midair, my mother's smile cracked, and my brother's face drained of color. My pulse hammered, but I didn't flinch. "What money?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. The chandelier buzzed overhead, the only sound between us. I looked at them, one guilty, one terrified. I reached for my phone, opened a folder, and slid it across the table. My dad's eyes widened. He wasn't expecting to see that. The night before the dinner, I was still in my Seattle apartment, surrounded by fabric samples and half-finished marketing briefs. My life there was simple, predictable, quiet in the best way. I'd built it from nothing, my own apartment, my own career, no favors, no handouts. Maybe that's why my father, Robert Bennett, always said I reminded him of himself. He ran a small construction business in Portland, and every time we spoke, he ended the call with, "I'm proud of you, Lucy." He never said that to my brother. Jason Bennett was the golden child that never quite shined. 3 years older, charming, ambitious, but reckless. He'd burned through every business loan and still managed to land on his feet because our mother Elaine always caught him. Growing up, she called him my boy with big dreams. I was the responsible one, which really meant the one who cleaned up the mess. When Jason called a week ago, his voice was soft, too careful. "Hey, Dad's not feeling great. We might cancel the anniversary dinner." "Cancel?" I asked. "He just emailed me about ordering wine for it." Jason hesitated. "He's been tired. I just think it's best if you don't come this time." The line went quiet after that. It didn't sit right. My father's 60th and 40th anniversary party, something he'd planned for months, wasn't something he'd skip without calling me himself. So I called him. He answered on the second ring, his voice full of life. "Lucy, you're still coming, right? Wait till you see the setup your mother's done." That's when I knew Jason was lying. On the flight home, I tried to reason with myself. Maybe he wanted attention, maybe he felt left out, maybe Mom didn't want tension between us. But deep down, there was something heavier. A sense that this dinner wasn't about celebration, it was about control. When I arrived in Portland, the Bennett house looked exactly the same. Clean white siding, trimmed hedges, the smell of pine candles my mother always lit before guests arrived. She greeted me with a perfect smile and a hug that felt rehearsed. Jason appeared behind her, grinning too wide. "Lucy," he said, "you made it." I smiled back, but something in his eyes flickered, nervous, watchful. And for the first time in years, I felt like a guest in my own family's home. The next morning, I woke to the smell of bacon and the faint sound of my mother humming in the kitchen. The house was spotless, almost unnervingly so. Every photo frame gleamed, every candle perfectly aligned. It wasn't hospitality, it was performance. At breakfast, Dad was cheerful, talking about the new deck he was building for a client. He looked healthy, strong, nothing like the sick version Jason had described. Across from him, Jason barely touched his food. He scrolled through his phone, pretending not to notice me watching. When Dad left to take a call, Mom leaned in. "Lucy, let's not bring up work or money tonight, okay? Your brother's been under stress." "Stress?" I asked. "From what?" She hesitated just long enough for the lie to show. "You know, Jason, he's just trying to figure things out. Don't make tonight tense." That's when I noticed her hands, her nails usually perfect, were chipped. It wasn't stress, it was worry. Later that afternoon, while setting the table for the dinner, I heard Jason in the next room on the phone. His voice was low but sharp. "No, I told you I'll pay it next week. I have it handled. Don't call me again." He hung up the moment he saw me standing there. "What's that about?" I asked. "Business," he said too quickly, stuffing his phone into his pocket. "You wouldn't understand." Maybe he was right. I didn't understand how someone could lie so easily. When he left the room, I noticed a thin stack of envelopes on the counter, payment receipts neatly folded. One of them addressed to an investment firm I recognized. My stomach knotted. That firm handled my father's accounts, not Jason's. That evening, as guests began to arrive, I slipped away to my old room upstairs. The light from the hallway hit the screen of my phone where an email alert waited. It was from my bank transfer confirmation, $200, $1,000 completed. I stared at the number. My name was on it. My heart pounded so loud I barely heard my father calling from downstairs. I refreshed the page. The money came from a joint account, a name I hadn't seen in years. Jason Bennett. My hands went cold. I didn't know how yet, but I knew why he'd lied about that dinner, and I knew the truth would come out at the table. I barely slept that night. The glow of my phone screen painted the walls while I scrolled through every transaction, every confirmation email. The pattern was clear, small test payments first, then one enormous transfer, all under my name. The signature was digital, but the access came from someone inside my family. At sunrise, I went downstairs. Mom was making coffee, humming again like nothing was wrong. I placed my phone on the counter. "Mom, did you know about this?" I asked quietly. She looked up confused or pretending to be. "Know about what, honey?" I turned the screen toward her. The $200,000 $1,000 transaction glowed between us. Her face tightened, then softened. "Lucy, please." Jason was in trouble. It was supposed to be temporary. He said he'd put it back before anyone noticed. My stomach dropped. Before who noticed, Dad or me? She sighed, glancing toward the hallway as if Dad might appear. "You've always been so independent. You wouldn't miss it. Your brother needed help." That sentence landed harder than any slap could have. You wouldn't miss it. I picked up my phone and walked out before she could say another word. I drove to meet Aunt Marjorie, the only person in this family who never played favorites. Her diner smelled like burnt toast and coffee, comforting in its honesty. Marjorie didn't even look surprised when I told her. "I figured as much," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "He came here last month bragging about some investment deal. Paid for lunch with $100 bills. I kept the receipts. Inside were payments, watches, hotel bookings, luxury purchases, all dated within the same week the money disappeared. I took photos of everything, sent them to Caroline Ross, Dad's lawyer, and an old friend from college. She called within minutes. "Lucy, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is financial fraud. If your father thinks you took it, you need to clear your name fast." "I'm not confronting him yet," I said. "Not until they're both in the same room." Caroline paused. "Then make sure you have proof ready." I smiled, a bitter kind of calm washing over me. "I already do." That night, while Mom set the table and Jason poured wine, I sat at the far end, my phone resting beside my plate. The same folder I'd shown you in the beginning, that folder was ready. And so was I. The dinner began like every other family celebration. Too much wine, too many polite laughs, and just enough tension to choke on. The chandelier above the table cast soft gold light across a feast my mother had curated, like a magazine spread, roasted salmon lemon tart silverware so polished it reflected our faces back at us. Dad looked genuinely happy. His cheeks were pink, his laugh loud, his eyes soft when they landed on me. "Lucy," he said, pouring me a glass, "I still can't believe you flew in just for this." I smiled, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." Jason sat across from me, tapping his thumb against the table, his smile too wide, too bright. Every so often he'd glance at Mom and she'd give him a small nod as if keeping time in some unspoken rhythm of secrets. For an hour it almost felt normal. Stories about Dad's business, Marjorie teasing him about his new gray hair. I almost let myself believe the worst was behind me. But the lie sat between us, heavy and waiting. Then Dad leaned forward, napkin still in his hand, voice calm but deliberate. "Tell me, Lucy," he said, "the $200,000 I gave you, what did you do with it?" The laughter died midair. The room froze. Forks hovered. My heart slammed once against my ribs, then stopped. "What?" I whispered. He didn't blink. "The $200,000. I transferred it months ago. Your brother said you were using it for something private, but now I want to hear it from you." My mother's face went rigid. Jason's hand tightened around his wine glass. I swallowed, feeling heat crawl up my neck. What $200,000? Silence. The chandelier hummed overhead, the sound of its faint buzz suddenly deafening. Then Jason laughed too loud, too forced. "Come on, Dad. Lucy's probably forgotten. She's got so much going on in Seattle." Dad's gaze cut to him. "Forgotten? 200,000 isn't pocket change." Jason's smile faltered. I could feel every guest watching us, pretending not to listen. Even Aunt Marjorie stopped mid-sip, her eyes narrowing. "I never received that money," I said, finally steadying my voice. "If you sent it, I didn't see a cent." Dad's brow furrowed. I have the confirmation, Lucy. Same account you used for the business fund. It was your name. I took a slow breath, forcing calm over the storm in my chest. Then maybe you should look closer at who else had access to it. Mom stiffened. Robert not here. He turned toward her, confused. Why not? If there's a problem, we can fix it. Jason set his fork down, the clink sharp in the silence. Dad, it's not a big deal. I can explain. Explain what I asked, cutting him off. My eyes locked on his. The transfer you made using my name or the hotel bills that came right after. He froze. Dad turned to me sharply. What are you talking about? I reached for my phone, unlocked it, and opened the folder. My hands were steady now. I slid the screen across the table toward him. Here, every transaction. The same account, same timestamp, but authorized from Jason's IP address. Receipts, payments, even screenshots of his calls with the investment firm. Dad scrolled his face, draining of color. Jason, you did this. Jason's voice cracked. Dad, please, it's not what you think. I borrowed it. I was going to pay it back. Borrowed. My father's voice rose sharp and cold. You forged your sister's access and stole her money. Mom shot up from her chair. Robert, stop yelling. He made a mistake. A mistake, Dad snapped. Elaine, you knew. She hesitated, tears in her eyes. He was drowning in debt. Robert, I thought if Lucy never found out, no one would get hurt. I laughed, the sound bitter. You thought I'd never find out. You signed my name. You let him take everything. Jason stood, hands trembling. I was desperate, Lucy. I didn't mean to ruin anything. Desperate enough to let Dad accuse me of theft, my voice broke. You sat there and watched me get humiliated for something you did. The guests were silent now. No more chatter, no clinking glasses. Just the sound of my father breathing slow and furious. He turned to my mother. You two planned this. Robert, please, she whispered. It was for our family. He slammed his hand against the table, the plates rattling. No, Elaine. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't steal. Jason's voice shrank. Dad, don't do this. We can fix it. Dad took out his phone. You're right, we can. He dialed without hesitation. Yes, I need to report a theft. $200,000. My mother's scream was instant. Robert, stop. Don't do this to him. He didn't even look at her. He did this to himself. Jason sank back into his chair, his hands over his face. The lights flickered, the hum of the chandelier turning into a soft electric drone. I sat there quietly, my pulse steady. 30 minutes later, the police arrived. Their flashlights cut across the glass red and blue lights spinning through the window. The room looked smaller, almost colorless now. Jason didn't fight when they asked him to stand. Mom begged, sobbing, clutching his arm, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. Dad signed the statement without a word. When he looked at me, there was no pride this time, just heartbreak. Lucy, he said, voice rough, I'm sorry. I shook my head. You believed what they told you. You had every reason to. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away gently. You wanted to know what I did with your money, I said. I protected it from them. The officers led Jason out. Mom followed, shouting promises that no one believed anymore. The door slammed behind them, leaving only silence and the faint echo of sirens fading into the night. Aunt Marjorie came over, placing a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, she whispered. I looked down at the folder still open on the table, the screen dimming. Maybe I said softly, but it doesn't feel like it. Dad sank into his chair, rubbing his temples. I raised them both, he muttered. How did we end up here? I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. Outside, the lights of the patrol car reflected off the window, the same cold shimmer that had once come from our chandelier. And in that moment, I realized something simple and final. Sometimes justice doesn't sound like victory. It just sounds like silence. The weeks after that dinner felt unreal, like walking through a house that still smelled like smoke after the fire's gone out. Portland was quiet. The headlines faded. The whispers around town did not. Jason's name came up in court documents then, in pitying conversations my mother could no longer control. Dad handled everything through Caroline Ross, his lawyer. The charges were clear: identity fraud, unauthorized transfer of funds. Jason avoided jail through a plea deal, but the restitution order was firm payback every cent or lose everything he owned. Mom stood beside him at every hearing, her face hollow, her hair unkempt for the first time in my life. When it was over, Dad called me into his office at home. The desk that used to hold his blueprints was now covered in paperwork. "I've rewritten my will," he said quietly. "The company, the house, everything, it's yours. They'll get nothing." I wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Maybe it wasn't revenge. Maybe it was his way of saying sorry. By the end of the month, Jason had sold his car, his watches, even the designer furniture Mom had bragged about for years. They moved to a rented duplex on the edge of town. I heard about it from Aunt Marjorie, not from them. When I left for Seattle again, Dad helped me load my bags into the car. The sky was gray, soft rain misting the driveway. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a single check, $800,000, the same amount he'd once meant for my future. "You deserve your clean start," he said. "Go build something you're proud of." As I drove north, the city lights of Portland disappeared in the rearview mirror. What replaced them wasn't peace, not yet just clarity. 6 months later, I stood in front of my boutique in downtown Seattle Harbor Line studio. The sign still smelled of fresh paint. Inside, sunlight spilled across racks of tailored jackets and silk scarves, each tag handwritten with my initials. The $800,000 my father gave me had turned into more than a business. It was a quiet reclamation of everything I'd lost. Dad visits sometimes, bringing coffee and that same proud half smile he used to give me when I was little. Aunt Marjorie says the store feels like closure. Maybe she's right. I haven't heard from Mom or Jason in months. Their restitution payments come in slowly, small, mechanical reminders of what greed costs. Sometimes when I close up at night, I think about that dinner table, the hum of the chandelier, the silence after truth hit. Betrayal doesn't always destroy you. Sometimes it sharpens you. If you've ever had to defend your name against your own family, tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone.